This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome everyone. So this is Roshan. So welcome to a workshop training on microservices, Docker, and containers. So what in this workshop, what we're gonna cover? We're gonna cover what do we mean by microservices, and what are microservice architecture, and how it is different from monolithic architecture, and what is monolithic application first of all, and then we will understand where do we run these microservices, and what's the runtime environment for this microservices. We'll understand that. So first we'll understand with the architecture, and first with the definition of the microservices, how it is different from monolithic applications, architecture of microservices, the advantages of microservices architecture, and what's the runtime environment for the microservices architecture. And then we need to understand then where this Docker and containers fit in. So I am assuming that you guys don't have any information about this zero background. So I'll be starting from scratch. So if you know things, it's good. You can just hear me well for some time. And if you have any doubts, any questions, you can definitely ask me. So this is something about me. I have around 14 years of experience in IT industry, mostly into performance engineering, Java and Python development. I've been also doing automation as well using Java, Python, PL SQL, shell scripting, and like from last 5 years, I'm working in cloud technology. So I'm a certified architect associate cloud professional. I'm currently working as an SRE. So that's something about me. So this will be the agenda of our discussion. So we will understand what is this monolithic uh, definition. What does this monolithic architecture mean? What do we exactly mean by monolithic, and its advantages and its disadvantages? And if any point of time, if you guys cannot hear me well, please, there's a chat window available. You can drop your point there. And okay, so the monolithic architecture we'll understand, and the advantages, disadvantages of monolithic architecture. Once we understand the disadvantages of monolithic, we would understand that yes, we need some better solution here. So we'll understand what does this microservices architecture mean, what does this microservices exactly mean, and how we architect microservices solutions, and then its characteristic and obviously its advantages. Sure, Pius. Sure. Okay. And then its advantages and disadvantages of microservice architecture. And once we understand that, we'll understand the differences between microservices and monolithic architecture, the runtime environment, that's very important now. And then we'll talk about containers and how do we create containers and what's the Docker importance, where do we have Docker, what is container engine, and what do we have Docker. So uh, we're gonna just devote 1 hour in understanding about monolithic microservices and all those things. And for the remaining time, we're going to practice here in this VM. In this, we have one instance that's in AWS instance that I have provisioned just now. It's nothing we have installed anything. It's just a bare EC2 instance, and we're going to understand how do we create containers here. We're going to do some hands-on here. So, okay, so the first part we'll go over the basics, the theory, and then secondly, we'll go over the hands-on. Okay, so that will be the plan for this workshop. Okay, so let's understand. So let's get started. Okay, so
Roshan,
to
is the recording has been started?
yes, it's being recorded. Yeah. I hope you guys can see the recording symbol if in your screen. Yeah, it's recording. Okay, so let's understand this monolithic architecture. What do we mean by monolithic? So we basically work in monolithic architecture. If we are not working in microservices, if you guys not sure which architecture you work in, so basically you're working in a monolithic architecture. So in this monolithic setup, we have three tiers, right? We have three tier. We have database, we have application server, we have one web server, presentation layer. So that's the three tier we mostly work in. Uh, and when we have our entire application logic, So just focus on this application layer. When we have our entire logic code in the application layer as a self-contained packaged and as a packaged and deployed as a single unit. So at that, and for that those application we call it's a monolithic application. So what I mean, suppose in your business logic for the application layer, you have suppose you have an application. For now, just I'm taking this example of bookstore app here, where I'm just highlighting four of its application is business units or business logic, accounts, shipping, payment, inventory. There could be some more of business units as well, like search functionality or any functionality. So it is a one application, and I have just four modules. Just consider like that, and it's tightly coupled. So when I say tightly coupled, packaged and deployed as a single unit. So when I say this, I mean that whatever the code I'm writing for the account section, the logic, business logic, I am freely using for my other modules as well. Suppose I have a function being written for this accounts module, suppose 10 functions, F1 to F10. And I'm just calling those functions anywhere in my other modules, shipping, payments, inventory. So this kind of architecture, we call it as a monolithic application. We currently mostly work in monolithic applications, where we have dependency on the code, we reuse the code, we write one function for one module, but we can freely use that function in other modules as well. So that's this kind of architecture is a monolithic architecture, okay, monolithic application. So we package and deploy as a single unit. So if we have to package and deploy this code here, so we do it as a single unit. So we provide all the code at once, we deploy all the code at once. So that's how it happens in monolithic architecture, and it has some serious disadvantages. Few advantages it has. Suppose for some reason I have my account section is not working. Okay, there is a bug in account section, and we have some issues. So since we are reusing the code of this accounts module everywhere in my application, so what happens if this is not working? There are high probability, high chance that my other modules will also get impacted, because if this is not running well for this module, it will definitely impact the functioning of the other modules as well. And to say so that my entire application will be down just for a problem, just for a small glitch in one of the modules of a bigger application. That's what happens in case of monolithic applications. That's the biggest disadvantages of it. Okay, and that's what we are trying to solve, and we'll understand what is this, how can we solve this kind of problem, and where does this microservices fit in. So we'll understand that part first. So what's the advantages of it? So yes, it's a single unit of deployment. We can deploy all the code at once. That's there. We need not deploy all. Suppose since it's a packaged and deploy a single unit, so we do it as a single unit of deployment, and it has some IDE support as well, like for Java, right? So you can have all the modules in the same IDE, like you have Eclipse or those kind of framework, Eclipse development, integrated development environment, you have it. So you can make use of those because all the modules are using the same code. Uh, we are writing all the modules in the same language, so it can have IDE support to the maximum extent. Yes, so we have these two advantages. Apart from that, if we look at the disadvantages here, it's huge. So first thing I told you, right, since we are reusing the code everywhere and anywhere, so even if one of the small modules is having a problem, it will impact other as well. uh, if I have a build issue in, if I have a just logic issue or compilation issue in one of the modules, it will not even let me build other modules part of the code, because it's single package and deployed as a single unit. So I have to build my code all at once. So that's a big problem here. And also there are a lot of disadvantages, like often very large, yes, because we have all the modules uh, in a deployed as a single package and deployed as a single unit. So it could be very large. If my application is very large, and the larger the application, it is more prone that my application will be down for some or the other region. Even if for a small glitch, my application may not build properly, cannot be deployed properly. Glitch in one of the modules, but it will impact other modules as well. So that's the biggest disadvantage. The issue with one small module can impact your entire application. Second disadvantage is that it is technology dependency on initial decision. Suppose you started with one module, started writing your code, started with one of the modules, let's say accounts, and you have selected one language to write in Node.js. It could be Node.js or Python, or it could be Java. Let's start with in one language. You started with one language. You have selected one language which is suiting to that particular uh, module. But since now, if we now you have to develop the application, you have to grow the application, you have to add more modules, more functionality, more code. You cannot change your language, what you have selected initially. That's again one of the biggest demerits. Though you know that if I use, because technology is changing, right? Uh, uh, so if you know that if you use a different technology, different language, your code can be optimized well in a very less number of lines. In a less code, you can write this logic better. You know this, but you don't have the option of selecting any other language or any other technology if you're working in a monolithic setup of architecture. You have to stick to the same language technology what you have initially decided to start up with. You cannot change that. So technology dependency on initial decision, that is there. Second disadvantage, it is implemented using a single development stack. As I mentioned, once you have selected one language, you cannot change that. You have to use the same language for all your modules, for upcoming modules. You cannot change that. If you want to change that, you have to write all your code all over again. So that's one of again a third biggest disadvantage. Frequent deployments. It is so big, your application is so big that for small uh, bugs, small issues, you're not going to release a patch. You're not going to uh, do a sprint release, because we work mostly in the agile technology, and currently we are going to DevOps, slowly moving into. Uh, so for small bug releases, we wait for a major quarterly release and then we deploy our application. We do those kind of things. So because our application base is so huge, frequent deployments are not practical. We have to wait for a major release to we can package all our bug fixes all at once, and then we can release to customer. That's what it happens in a monolithic architecture. So these are the various disadvantage, and one very important. So all the disadvantages here are remarkably important here to understand, and to understand the importance of your microservices architecture. Last but not the least, need to scale the entire application stack. So what is this point? So suppose you have one more functionality, let's call it search. Okay, or I can take example from any of these four modules. Suppose the user base, uh, users are trying to use that functionality more, or that module more as compared to other modules. Like for example, if you open a Flipkart or Amazon.com app, what do you do? Most of the users, what they do, they search for a product. They implement search functionality. They hit the search module more often than any other modules available. So the user hits for the search module is comparatively higher, more than the other modules, right? So what in that case, I would like to assign more resource to those such functionality, those for such modules which are being hit by the user more, where the user load is more, we tend to, if we need to increase the capacity, the resource for those modules, is it not possible to just increase the resource of those modules? I have to increase the entire application stack. So I have, suppose if I have deployed these 4 modules in the application server, in one of the application servers, I have to increase the capacity of the application server itself. I have to increase the resource of the application server itself, the number of CPU, or the RAM, and those part. So I cannot do for the module level. So that's again one of the disadvantages. And since I cannot do that for the, suppose there's only for the search functionality, the user requirement is more, not for the other modules. So most of my resource is wasted. Uh, I cannot specifically increase the resource for one particular module. I have to do it for all the modules because I have to increase the application server configuration itself. I do not have an option just to increase the capacity or the resource for those containers, for those modules, not containers, so modules. Okay, we're going to understand that module. We're going to, when we talk about the microservices, we're going to talk about containers, so modules. So we cannot do that specifically for any of those modules in a monolithic architecture. So these are the disadvantages here. Okay, and then we have to solve this problem, right? We have to solve this problem. And how do we solve this problem? We can solve this problem using microservices architecture. Okay, I hope everyone understood about the monolithic application. Do we have any doubt here till this point? Feel free. Yeah. Good, Rifty. You're very prompt. Good to know.
Roshan, one small doubt.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Ganges. Yeah.
Yeah. So, do you have any live examples of any monolithic architecture applications that are running nowadays? I believe everything is migrated to microservice. But
Yes.
even in the prior experience, have you come across anything monolithic, and would you like to share that experience? How easy is it to migrate from monolithic to microservice?
See, when you browse as an end user, right? When you browse like an end user, you do not feel the difference. You hit the URL, you get the web page, you get the response. So as an end user, you cannot get the difference if it's a monolithic or microservices. Okay. It is about the way we deploy and we segregate your modules. So just consider any application which you have worked maybe 5 years before in your organization or 10 years before in your organization. So those same application are being migrated to microservices now because they understand the importance of microservices. The user will not feel that it's a monolithic or microservices. External users, the end users, they would not feel that. They are hitting the same URL, they are getting the same web page. Uh, so
Yeah,
it depends.
understood.
Yeah, it depends on the way you deploy it in the server on the server. So that differentiates between monolithic and microservices. Okay, so going forward now, so let's solve this problem. We have lots and lots of disadvantages here, and we would like to solve this problem. So how can we solve this problem? We can solve this problem using microservices, where what we are doing here. So I'll just give you a high level, then I will go deep about that. So now I have these 4 here modules. I'm showing up here 4 modules. They are tightly packaged and deployed as a single unit. What I'm going to do, I'm going to deploy them separately. Just try to understand the high level thing. I'm going to deploy them separately, and I'm going to remove the dependency between these modules. Once I remove the dependency, so if my, what I mean by removing dependency, that I'm not going to reuse the code what I'm writing for accounts section in any of my other modules. I'm not going to reuse that code. That's what I mean, remove the dependency. every unit, every module will be autonomous and specialized. They can manage on their own. So I have to make sure that I'm not calling the functions, the logic, the code which I have written for account module. Uh, in that process, I may have to duplicate the code. That's fine. Again, that can be workable. I'll talk about that. But the bottom line is that once I remove the dependency and I make these four modules here specialized and autonomous, a separate unit, then I solve many problems. So if my one of the modules is not working, let's say account is having some problem, so it will not impact my other applications. So just to give you a live example, suppose you are working in an like Ola app is there, or Uber app is there, or Swiggy app is there. Suppose there is a function called notification is not working. You ordered a food or you booked a cab, and you are expecting some notification that yes, you have booked the cab. Suppose that notification functionality is not working. Does it mean that you cannot book a cab or you cannot order a food? No, it will not impact. So if one functionality is not working, it will not impact the other modules. So still the application is available, but only that specific functionality is not working. So that's the main difference between microservices and monolithic architecture. And this is how we were able to solve the problem. So we have to make sure that we are not dependent on any other modules. All the modules are specialized and autonomous, so they can handle on their own, they can manage on their own, and they can be deployed separately, not as a single unit. They need to be loosely coupled, not tightly coupled for microservice architecture. So that's the high level. Okay, I'm going to go slowly to make you guys understand about the microservice architecture. But if you have understood the high level, we are good. Okay. So let's understand this. So creating smaller and multiple component services which are built to handle the very specific concern. So what is microservices? So basically what I'm trying to do here, that I'm trying to break my application. Suppose, let me just draw one. Suppose this is my application, okay, one big application I have, and there are functionality. This is doing some functionality, okay, some good retail application, let's call it retail application. So what's happening here, what I'm going to do in microservices, I'm going to break this down. Okay, I'm going to break this down into multiple microservices. Okay, so I just try to break this application. This could do any particular functionality. I'm not bothered about what it is doing. I'm just trying to make you understand what do we mean by microservices. So we are trying to break the entire application into smaller modules. That's what I'm trying to do here. So let's call this microservices 1, M1. Okay. And then I again decided to let's break other part. Okay, and let's call this M2. Okay. So I decided to break that and I call that M2. Second microservices. So this is doing some functionality. So let's say this is doing a search functionality. This is doing a search functionality. This is doing some other functionality. Okay. Uh, any other business logic. So I'm talking about the business logic here. I'm just focused on I'm trying to concentrate your attention to the application layer itself, application server, where all your business logic resides. I'm just trying to break that part into various modules. So now let's say I just broke this entire application into 6 microservices. Let's say that. Okay, just I have used and broken this into 6. Okay, so now it's 3/3, then like let's say 4, 5th, 6th. So just imagine that I have broken this application into 6 microservices. This is M3, and let's call this guy as M4 and let's call this guy an M4 till here. So just I divided, so just understand that this is M4 and this is like this area here is M5. Okay, so I have split my application, divided my application into various microservices. That's what I have done. And modules, like consider it's a module of your bigger. So my entire application is divided into 6 modules. I divided that, and I intend to make this not independent. I don't want to these individual modules to depend on each other. Okay, and so I'm writing the code here, whatever I'm writing, F1, F2, F3, whatever row code I'm typing here, whatever code I'm typing, a lot of functionality I'm just putting in here, a lot of code, FN, whatever. So reusing the code. I'm not calling this F1 function, F2 function, what I have written for M3 anywhere. If I need a similar functionality, suppose I will write a separate code for this. So I may have to rewrite few codes, but again, this can be workable. This disadvantage is there that I need to, suppose I'm trying to use the same functionality, I may need to rewrite the code. That's fine. But again, if the code base is like 60% overlapping, what I can do, I can club M3 and M2, and I can make this as a one microservices. So under that, I need to be smart enough. While that's an architecture level like decision. How many microservices we can break your monolithic application and all those stuff. It is not that simple to understand. We need to understand the high level and what all the code we are writing. Do we have more code duplicacy? If that is the case, just merge those modules and make it as a one microservices. Again, M3 and M4 can be merged and can be M7, can be one other microservices. Again, it depends on just divide the entire application into code, okay, and then just keep different buckets and just call all these are microservices. So what are microservices? They are a subset of your application. So if you have understood this, these microservices are nothing but the subset of your application. That's it. Then you have understood everything. Then it's just about knowing few more things. Okay. So now creating smaller and multiple component services which are built to handle a very specific concern. So these modules here are doing some functionality. Okay. They are used for a dedicated functionality. They are specific purpose. Okay. So yeah. So if you want to design an application that is multi-language, easily scalable, easy to maintain and deploy, highly available, and that minimizes failures, then use the microservice architecture to design and deploy a cloud application. Yeah. We do work with microservices basically in the cloud application mostly. I've not seen microservices. You can write, so it's about the hardware itself. Cloud is nothing but a resource which you do not own. As simple as that. We have the same resource. I hope you understand the difference between on-prem and cloud. Yeah. So in a microservice architecture, each microservice owns a simple task and communicates with the client or with other microservices by using lightweight communication mechanisms such as REST API. So what I mean, the advantages, I can write M1 in one language. I can write M1 in Java. I can write M5 in Node.js. I suppose this M6 I'm developing now, and I understand that if I write in Python, I can implement it very easily. So this could be in M6 could be in Python, different language, different technology. M2 could be in other language. So I have the freedom here to select the technology and the language in microservices, but it was not the case with monolithic application. Once I decided that my initial uh, module is being written in Java, then for other subsequent modules, there is no other options for me. I have to use the same language support because I have to call those functions, right? I have to call whatever I'm writing the function here in M1. I have to call those functions for my other module. So I cannot use a different language, and those are the issues with monolithic. But here, my microservices are communicating with each other through REST API. REST API. So it doesn't matter that which this could be in another language, this could be in another language, but these two microservices can talk to each other through REST API. So that's how the microservices work mostly. And if you look at the architecture of it, so you can just focus here that here I have three microservices I'm showing here. One is written in Java, another is written in Python, third one is written in Go language. I have two databases as well, but that's fine. That could be there in the monolithic application as well. Just focus on this application part here, that I can use different technology, different language for my different for my microservices. So that's very important to understand here. Microservices enable you to design your application as a collection of loosely coupled services. That's the word here. We use loosely coupled in case of microservices, but in case of monolithic, it's tightly coupled. That's the word we use here. Microservices follow the share nothing model. We do not share much of the code, like we don't share a code at all, and run as a stateless processes. This approach makes it easy to scale and maintain the application. Yes, and suppose we'll understand the runtime environment of microservices, then we'll understand how can we scale. Suppose this let me go back to this example. Yeah, suppose this is M5. Suppose this is my search functionality, or which needs more resource. Suppose this code, the users are hitting this code more. They're accessing this code more. There could be a case, right? You guys are from performing background, so we do workload modeling, right? And depends on the user hits, we do design the workload modeling, and then uh, uh, we make the user group separately out of 100%. Suppose this could be your 60% or 40% of the user are hitting this functionality. So we assign 40% user load here, and then rest we divide, make it 100%, and then we do a load test. That's how we do workload modeling, right? Suppose this is the microservices, this functionality users are hitting more. So what could be done? What can we do? We did not scale the entire application stack how we were doing in the monolithic application. What we can do, once we understand that how do we run this microservices? Basically, we run microservices in containers. I'll talk about that containers. So we can scale.
Roshan, one thing, like
Yes,
scale the application in means
please.
in
Scale means
monolithic
increase the resource.
resourcing,
Uh,
right?
Resource means CPU and RAM mostly. Yeah.
Okay, and they usually, okay, and in the microservices, the word you use like loosely coupled services. Is that means like independent services?
Loosely coupled means they are not tightly coupled. So in tightly coupled, we use for the monolithic architecture where all our modules are tightly coupled. They are reusing the code everywhere and anywhere. But here they are loosely coupled. But loosely coupled means they do interact with each other through REST API. It's a word given to them. Don't go with the deep meaning of that. Loosely coupled means they are not sharing any code with each other, but they can still interact through REST API.
Okay.
Yeah. So suppose what I can do, I can have once we understand that how do we create these microservices and what's the runtime environment for these microservices. When I eventually understand that microservices we deploy in containers. We have container engine. I'm going to talk about that. We have but this is required because if people are not sure what is container engine, difficult to understand what is this container. So if we understand the container engine,
Roshan, one quick question here. Sorry to interrupt you. I saw somewhere written microservices are implemented only for stateless applications. So can we implement the microservice for stateful applications also? Or is it not possible?
see, I will talk about that once we go deep about that. We'll take up that question. Okay.
Sure, sure.
Cool.
Thank you.
See, so let's go understand this basics first, because if I explain, people may not understand exactly. I need to start from scratch what is stateful and stateless. So I'll take this question later. Okay. So let's say that I have this M1 to M6 microservices, and this M5 needs more scaling. There could be a case that this functionality is like search application where people are hitting more. Okay, the user load on this the hits or for on this particular business module is more. So what we can do, I can scale only M5 container. I'll make sure that M5 runs in an instance where we have more resources on an instance, because we run containers on the instance, means EC2 instance. So we can make sure that the EC2 instance where the containers are running have the more resource, and we can limit that only 2 or 3 M5 containers. This M5 containers can be hosted, can be deployed to that EC2 instance. In that way, my M5 container, which is hosting this microservices, can scale up better. Okay, so just know, if you have understood 50% of this, just know that we can scale the containers, the microservices individually as well. We did not scale the entire application scale. If you decide, if you need to just assign more resource to any of the specific containers, you can do that. Okay. So that's the microservices architecture here. And looking at the characteristics, so that's what I told you.
Roshan,
Auto,
one small.
sure.
Sorry to interrupt you in between. You might have already covered this and maybe I missed it, but just to reiterate, you said microservice is deployed on containers. So when we talk about scaling up of a microservice, we actually scale up the container or the microservice itself?
No, we create more containers. We create more containers. We create
Okay,
multiple containers.
understood. Okay.
So to understand the characteristic of microservices, we have words like autonomous and specialized. So as I just explained you in the beginning, that now you can see there is no dotted line between these modules. So these modules are independent now. They can run on their own. People can directly hit the account section, and they can easily retrieve any information, or they can do whatever is expected to do this accounts module. So what I have mean, that there is no dependency now, serious dependency on the code side, that I'm not calling the code which I'm writing for the accounts module in any of my other modules. And all these modules are autonomous and specialized and independent of each other. So that's what the microservices mean exactly. And the advantages are huge here. Huge. So whatever the disadvantages was there in my monolithic application, we covered, we were able to solve those problems in the case of microservices. Now we can do flexible scaling. What I mean, that I can scale up if the user requirement for one of the microservices is more. So as I told you that we run microservices on containers, so we can scale up that container specifically. We did not scale the entire all my containers for all my microservices. I need not do that. I can only scale up that container, that specific container. We'll talk about that. We'll understand once we understand the containers more in detail. Okay, so we can do flexible scaling, which was not there in the case of monolithic application. We can easily deploy. Now we are breaking down so many applications. We are breaking we have simple applications, right? So if there is an issue with one of the modules, I need not build and deploy all the other modules. I can only work on that module where we have the issue, and we can easily deploy that particular module. So it's easy to deploy, but it was not the case with monolithic. If there was issue with one of the modules, I had to deploy and build the entire code itself, the entire all the other modules. So that was one of the drawbacks of the monolithic. But now these are the advantages of microservice architecture. A technological freedom. As I mentioned, right, I can have one microservices in one language and another microservice in another language. There is no like restriction. I have an option. I can use different technology for my upcoming new applications or new modules. In the case of microservices, reusable code, I can still reuse the code within the microservices. If I am writing a code here, F1, F2, Fn in for M3 microservices, I can still reuse the code within M3. Okay, but I cannot reuse the code beyond M3 to in other modules. That is there. So I cannot duplicate the code anywhere else in other modules, but I can reuse the code within M3. That is not a problem. So that's again advantages here. And resilience, the most important of it. If one of the microservices goes down, suppose this is having some issue, M1, it will not impact at all my other modules, my other microservices. Other functionality is working as it is, since it is not dependent, the basic part of it. So we have decided on the architecture level itself that we would like to go with microservices. So, and these are the advantages of it. So resilience is the most important the advantage here. uh, Resilience means highly available most of the time. So if M1 is not working, it will not impact other modules. My application is still functional. So that's the advantages of it. And if you look at the disadvantages, we do have some, but it doesn't like we cannot work this out. We can still work this out. Okay, so there are few disadvantages of microservices, like if we can handle, but know that this can be handled as well. Like spawning is like, if we have many containers, let's say, okay, if we have more containers, more microservices, we'll understand that we host these microservices in containers only. So I'm going to use these microservices and containers interchangeably. Okay, so suppose I have more microservices, more containers, so it's sometimes it becomes difficult to manage. But I need to be smart enough to break my application in such a way that I do not have more containers. Suppose if I M1 to M6, I can break this to M1 to M100 also. In at that case, it's difficult to manage. So I need to be smart enough and intelligent enough not to have more, not to create unnecessary microservices for me. And we can work this out. We have container orchestration engine as well, like Kubernetes support. We can leverage that. If you have more containers, we can use that as well. So the disadvantages are such that it's not like it cannot be managed. It can be managed. Duplicate code. So yes, as I mentioned, right, that I cannot reuse the code what I'm writing for one of the microservices to other modules. So in that case, I may have to duplicate the code in M1 across, like M1, whatever code I'm writing for M3, I cannot reuse the code in M1, M5, or M4, M6. So that is one of the disadvantages. But again, uh, it's not like it cannot be managed. So if you see that, suppose M1 and M3 has 60% of same code, let's say that. So just don't create a separate microservices, M1 and M3, keep it same. Just include M1 and M3, because 60% of the common code, why do you need to create a separate microservices? If that is the case, just uh, make it one microservices. Combine M1 and M3 and make it one microservices.
Roshan, you said it cannot be created and it has to be independent, but can it be referenced? For example, in Java we have inheritance, right? Can we do something of that sort here in microservice?
Can you repeat your question, Gangesh?
So yeah, so you said each of the microservice or each of the modules, they have independent code and it cannot be duplicated, or I cannot refer to M1's code in M3,
Correct.
but can I reference it? As in, if I want to use a functionality, maybe I can create an object in M3 and then call M1. That is
Yeah,
also not possible.
if you can reference or not, see, if can you, if m1 is not, suppose you are referencing a code, so reference is also like reusing the code. So either at least you are having a base, you are referencing some code, you are basically trying not to write the code here in m3, and you just want to refer the code in m1, right? So suppose m1 is not working, so do you
Correct.
think your m3 will work in?
No,
No, right?
but okay, some of the flow controls, right? They have.
It is like a debatable thing, and it's go beyond the your architecture decision. So let's keep that aside. Okay, it's a more
Okay.
of a question.
No, no. I mean, what I wanted to ask is, in the real world example, right? There are some transactions which are dependent on the prior transactions.
Okay,
For
right.
example, even in case of bookstore, there might be some transactions which are dependent on the input of the prior transactions. So in that case, how do we handle it if it is I mean, if there is a issue with referencing?
See, if there's a dependency, if you are trying to get one information, if M3 is trying to get one information from M1, okay, and then M3 can only work. If that is a scenario, you have to make sure M1 works well first, okay, and then you may like reference, as you mentioned, you can write, you can reference this m1 just to make sure that m1 and m3 works as a single distinct unit, okay. And if m1 is totally dependent on m3, like m3 is totally dependent on m1, I would suggest have these two functionalities in the same container. If
Understood. Okay, understood.
M1 doesn't, if M1 is not being used for a separate any other task, M1 is just being used for M3, like a helper container. Okay.
Hmm.
M1 is just a helper container helping M3. So better to have these two in the same pod. I'll talk about the
Correct.
pod later. So let's
Understood. Understood.
have M1 and M3 in the same pod. Why do you want to keep it separate? Okay. Okay. Sure. And Revati, your question, spawning means, suppose if you have more containers, right? It can be a troublesome activity to manage. Spawning means too many containers. Just understand this word meaning. Spawning means if you have too many containers, trying to create too many microservices, trying to split up your application into a lot more microservices than you can manage. So if you have too many microservices, sometimes it's difficult to manage all your microservices, because you have to do clustering, load balancing, auto scaling. You have to take care of all these things. Well, once you talk about the Kubernetes, we'll understand. Then we have to do all those things. Your auto scaling will come into play, and load balancing, scheduling. So if you have too many containers, it's difficult to manage all your containers. So that's what the spawning word means. Okay, sure. And maintenance. So again, if you have more microservices, right, more containers, so obviously it's difficult to maintain, because you have difficult to maintain, that's it. So if you have more containers, so just make sure that you have enough, not even more containers, not more like microservices, so that it's difficult for you to manage, to maintain. So that should not be the case. So the disadvantages are such that it's like it cannot be managed. It's not like that. It can be managed, but if you plan it accordingly. Network performance. So once you talk about containers, so your container, for to achieve high availability, one of the containers can be in one AG, one data center. AZ is availability zone. In AWS world, we call data center as AZ. Suppose you have one container in one of the AZ, and of the same container or other container in other AZ. So there is a huge difference between these two. The distance between these two containers are huge. So network could be a problem. Okay. So you have to create containers in such a way that it gets created in the same AZ, and same data center basically, to just sum it up. Okay.
Roshan, this is Anand here. So just have
Huh.
a question. This seems to be like a very interesting class for me. So as a performance tester engineer, do you have like a complete course or something on this front, like a crash course or a regular course wherein to just, I mean, I know this is little away from this because, but I'm stepping out, so I quickly want to ask this. So I have like close to 7 to 8 years of experience, 9 years, but most of my experience is completely on the on-prem. Have very good foundation of engineering, but wanted to scale up on this cloud front because these days all the service product based companies are moving into cloud. So just wanted to understand, you have any full-fledged or maybe a crash course on this?
Okay, sure, sure. So see, we have a course here that's called Cloud Performance Engineering in DevOps. What we do teach AWS here, the cloud. First, if people are new to the cloud, I'm not sure if we have acquainted with cloud or work on only on on-prem. So we first deal with AWS. We go over a lot of sessions. Because now since we're working in AWS cloud and microservices, we mostly deal with Linux operating system. So we're gonna have some sessions on around 5 to 6 sessions on Linux command line. We go over Linux, all the commands. Then we go over microservices in detail, Docker in detail, Kubernetes in detail, and we go over EKS. That's called Elastic Kubernetes Service. That's the AWS offerings of Kubernetes. We understand EKS and then Jenkins and CI/CD pipeline. So we have a course. We call it a cloud performance engineering in DevOps. You can get this information in this link. I'm going to paste this link in the chat window. And if
Yeah,
you have,
Roshan, put it on the chat window, Roshan sir, so that I can have a look at it. Thank you.
sure, I have just pasted the link in the chat window. You can go over this course, and you just can go over the entire. I have few demo sessions as well, and I have a batch being like getting started on 9th of March, next week. So this will be a demo session. I'm gonna just have a demo session about this course on 9th March in the morning, 7:30 to 8:30 IST time, for the people in
Is it a free demo, or do we have to pay for the demo as well?
the free.
And
The free
do we have multiple demos?
Yes, we have multiple demos. We're gonna have 2, 3 demos. Yeah, 2 to 3 demos,
Okay.
and then we will restrict the demos. Yeah, we're gonna
Okay.
have 2 to 3 demos, and you can go over the entire course syllabus here. Uh, Talking about AWS, so you can understand what all we take up in AWS. You can understand here the entire course syllabus is here, and then for the Linux command line, we have the entire thing that we cover. The entire command we cover. We start from very scratch for Linux as well. Then we talk about
Uh,
architecture. Then
Roshan, sorry, one more question. Roshan. Sorry, one more question. Maybe I'm overstepping. So, what is the duration for this course?
okay, so
And
this is like
do you also go with the little basics of or a little bit of coding part as well? Because I'm not too much into coding. I have done some reading and all. That's it.
okay. So this is the course which goes for 2 months. Okay. Uh, uh, sure. I wanted to talk about this later. I'm just gonna finish this Revati in just a minute. So we're gonna have this 2 months. You can definitely join the demo, and we can go over this. You can just join the demo on 9th of March. You will be notified in the same WhatsApp group. We can do that. I'll check with this training solutions team, and they can inform you about this demo sessions. And this course will be of 2 months, 45 hours, 1 hour every day on the weekdays, 7:30 to 8:30 a.m. IST time. And on the coding side, yes, we do cover Linux shell scripting, and everything is from scratch. So the people who are trying to improve from the on-prem to cloud, and they are new to this Docker, microservices, Kubernetes thing, cloud thing. So yes, this course is for them basically who are trying to transition themselves from on-prem to cloud. Yeah. So that's all about this course. So this you can find this entire information in the link. Thank you, everyone. So let's talk about this later. Okay. I hope I was able to answer your questions. Right. Okay. So let's understand this. So network performance. Okay. So network could be a problem if you have containers located far from each other. So suppose you have one container located in one of the AZ. So AZ is the availability zone. That's one of the in AWS term, data center. And if you have another container located in another AZ, that could help you to to achieve high availability. So suppose one AZ goes down, but your request can be picked by the container which is there in the other AZ. Okay, there could be a case. So in this case also, what happens? The network suffers. Suppose that if the distance increases, right, uh, between the server and between the two microservices, so network could suffer. Okay, but we can manage this if you can deploy the container on the same AZ in different fault domains. We can also do that way. Okay, so there are a few disadvantages of microservices. Okay, and it's not like you cannot be managed spawning and duplicate code, maintenance, and network performance. It cannot be. It's not like it cannot be managed. It can be managed, but there are challenges. I would say they are not the disadvantages. I would say the challenges which needs to be handled while working in a microservices architecture. I would say that way. So now you guys have understood the difference between the monolithic and the microservices architecture. So you guys can easily understand this. So process, I'm just going to summarize this up, and then I'm going to start with the AWS this session on how do we create and how do we work with this microservice, how do we create these containers, and all about this hands-on. So yeah, we still have some time. Yeah, I think. So let's understand the summarized things. Let's summarize things between monolithic and microservices architecture. So monolithic is processes are tightly coupled, as we know, and run as a single service, right? But here we have only one service per process. That's what we have. And if you have more microservices, you have more services, and those interact with each other through REST API. That's the architecture difference between the monolithic and microservices. Here adding features becomes more complex. Yes, because you have to use the same language, same technology, and you have to again, for deployment, you have to build the entire code with the new code, and all those things are there. So it's more challenging, I would say, in the case of monolithic, adding a new feature. But here it's very simple. In case of microservices, it's an independent unit, and you have to just make sure that the new microservices interact with other microservices through REST API. So each service performs one single function. Here, add risk for application availability. Yes, it happens. That's the biggest disadvantage, because if your one issue in any one of the modules, what happens? It can impact the entire application availability. It can do that. But here in the case of microservices, it doesn't do that. It can be updated, deployed, and scaled rapidly to meet demand. And even if you have an issue or one issue with one of the microservices, it will not impact the other microservices, other modules. So that's the biggest advantages here in the case of microservices. Right. So that's all about the theory portion. We have covered the theory portion till now, and we're gonna start with some hands-on and how do we create microservices and stuff like that. So do we have any questions till this point, or are we all good? Okay, I assume that we are all good. Let me jump quickly to just understand where do we run these microservices. So we have physical servers. Okay. So options are three. We have three options. We have physical servers, virtual servers, VMs, we call it VMs, and we have containers. So we can run microservices in any of these three available hardware. Okay, we can do that. We can run in physical server, we can run in virtual servers, but we can also run in containers. But where it is more efficiently utilized, that's the important question. So you need to ask yourself that where should we run this microservices? See, the reason why we went ahead with virtualization, the VMs from physical server was only one reason. We wanted to utilize the resource efficiently. We do not want our resource to be underutilized. That is the main reason why we used virtualization technology to virtualize my physical servers and to create VMs. Because what used to happen in early when we started with the software development, we used to host one application, the entire application, in just which was very few KBs or MBs in the one physical box, which is having a huge capacity. We used to do that, and what happens, and a lot of resource was underutilized, not at all utilized. So we were wasting a lot of resource if we were hosting our application in the physical server. So what happens after virtualization came into picture? We divided these physical servers, we virtualized the hardware, and we created VMs. Okay, so there are a lot of virtualization softwares, like we have VMware software and a lot more other softwares as well. Virtualization, you can just type in Google virtualization software, you'll get a lot of you have hypervisor as well, the software, one of the virtualization software. And then if you install that software, you can create VMs. So now I was able to use just one VM, and I was able to host my application, what I was doing from the physical server itself. And now I have so many VMs to host other applications. So I was able to make use of resource better, more efficiently. So now again, the VMs are not being properly utilized. So this transition called virtualization, this process called virtualization, where we created the VMs. Now we have entered into the phase, we call it containerization. What we do on the VMs itself, what we do, we create containers, a lot of containers. So now we were able to host the application in a VM, one VM. We were able to, we suppose I have a three servers, like database server, web server, application server, app, database, and web. So I was using, let's say, three VMs to host my application. So now if I'm talking about containerization, so in the same VM, in only one VM, I can create three containers. And I can use those three containers as app server, database server, and web server. So app, DB, and web. So that is what happens. So now suppose I could use, I can use the resource better in a more efficient way. That's called the containerization. And then for this containerization to happen, we need a container engine. Okay, and that container engine could be your Docker, could be your Podman, could be your any other container engine like Rocket. So you guys must have heard of this word Docker. So Docker is a container engine. So we use Docker. Docker is a container engine. So we use container engine to containerize the virtual servers. Once we install, so on a VM. So let me talk about this. Understand. So it's on this diagram, what you see on your left. Okay, that's called a VM, and that's there's three VMs: VMA, VMB, VMC. So we have three VMs here. So let's understand that this is your physical server, your hardware, and I have installed one software called virtualization software. So let's call this software the hypervisor. Your virtualization software could be hypervisor. Then I could create three VMs here: VMA, VMB, VMC.
Roshan, one question I have. Sorry to interrupt you. Just one question. So the microservices is being created for only for the business logic layer, or it is for all the three layers, whether it is presentation layer or
could
the
be
database
anything.
servers.
Could be anything. Yes, it could be anything. So once I talk about microservices, your database could be, see, your database is database. So microservice is a service. So basically, microservice is basically used for the logic itself. Okay, but it cannot replace the database. You can have one microservice, you can have one container for the database, but it is not like your other containers cannot be your other containers could be your business logic, and your one of the containers could be your database. So it is not like only the business logic of it. So if you are containerizing your entire application, so you have to containerize all your application components as well.
Okay, so
Okay,
okay, so the microservices is mainly for
the
the number of
database,
features that.
but database will be also there. Okay, it's not like database will not be there at all. So database has to be there. So microservices will have the code, the business logic mostly, but it will use the database to update some information, or retrieve some information from the database. So it will not replace the database. Database has to be there. So it is, but your your web server could be hosted in a microservice, but you need a database, and database can be run in a container. We'll understand that MySQL database is there, so that could be a container, but it doesn't mean that it only have the logic, business logic. It could be your container also, your database. See,
The
we'll talk
database will
about
be in
this.
one yeah, database will
Yes.
be in one container, not for every microservice services.
No, no,
We have separate database containers, right?
exactly. You're right.
Okay.
Okay, so we have lots to cover here. I would request you to, if you want me to cover the entire thing, please post your question in the chat window. Yeah. Okay, let's understand this part here. So it's a VM here. So it's a physical server, and on top of that, we have installed one hypervisor. That's a virtualization software. And now, after we have installed the virtualization software, I can have VMA, VMB, VMC, three VMs I created. So now I can have my application server, my web server, my database server, and I can have my application running. You know about this setup here. Now I'm talking about containerization. So I'm just showing here the one VM here. Okay, you're seeing the one VM on the image, the diagram of your on your right. You see one VM, and in this VM, I am installing, after the host operating system, I need to install one software here. That is called container engine. I need to install a container engine, and that will containerize my host operating system. So hypervisor virtualizes the hardware to create VMs, but container engine containerizes the host operating system to create containers. So that's the two difference you need to understand here. Okay, uh, and you can just understand here that I do not need, see, for the VMs, I need a guest operating system. I need an operating system for my application server, for my web server, for my database server. I need an operating system. But for the containers, app A is my app server, app B is my web server, and app C is my database server. I can have my entire application running in one VM itself in three containers. So I'm able to, what I'm achieving here, the important point is that I'm achieving, I am utilizing the resource efficiently. That is what a big deal. That's what saves a lot of money, right? If I'm able to build the entire application in a less space, less resource, in a less resource, using this less resource, I saved a lot of money for my organization. And that is why containerization is so important, and that is why virtualization was a revolution. because I could create VMs and I can have a lot many applications in the same physical server when I created the VM. Same way, when I'm doing a containerization, I'm creating a lot more containers in the same VM, and I can have my entire application running. So the takeaway is that the VM the VM here the hypervisor virtualizes the hardware here, and the container engine virtualizes the host operating system. And here we don't need a separate operating system in the case of containers, but I can have my app server, my DB server, my web server in the form of containers. Okay, so that's the important point to understand here. Uh, uh, okay, so runtime. So what is the containers? Runtime environment for microservices are containers. Containers virtualize at the OS level. That's what I told. They virtualize the host operating system. So that is the reason I don't need a separate operating system. So whatever the binaries and libraries it needs, suppose my app server, my web server, my database server, it needs, it will take it from the host operating system, and the whatever it doesn't find in the host operating system, it will have a separate binary and library, additional binary and libraries for the container. Okay, maybe it's difficult to understand if you're hearing this for the first time, but I'm going to demonstrate this. Okay, so currently this is a VM. Okay, one VM. So this is my AWS console here, and okay, this is my AWS console. I have just used one. This is my instance. This is my instance I provisioned, and that's the my public IP, and that's my private IP. Okay, and you can just see that 172.31.34.18 is the same private IP I'm using. So it is the same uh, EC2 instance. So suppose what I need to do now to create containers. So this is a VM, one EC2 instance. You can just create a launch instance, and you should need to follow a few steps, and you can get it configured. You can provision this one EC2 instance, and then on top of that, to containerize this, you have to install one software that's called Container Engine. That's called Docker. So you have to install this Docker. So currently, if you look at, let me be, this is a, um, so I just converted from my Ubuntu user to root account user. So if you just check if I have a Docker installed or not, so what you can do, you can just type Docker version. So I do not have a Docker installed, but to install Docker, I just need to type this command here. I'm going to apt uh, install. First, I need to always update the package. Whenever I provision any instance, I need to update the package. To update this package, since it's a Ubuntu operating system, I have to use apt. If this could be your Red Hat or Fedora operating system, I need to use yum. Okay, yum update. But since it's Ubuntu, I have to use apt update. So I'm going to update the packages of this operating system always. So it's like your Windows update you do, right? When you provision your Windows instance, or you get your Windows laptop, first thing you do what? You update your packages. You do Windows update, right? So I just updated the packages here. And what I can need to do just to check Docker version is installed or not. No, it's not there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to install Docker now. So I'm going to install the container engine basically, and this will allow me to create containers on this VM. So I'm going to do this now. I'm going to yes, and what it does, it will install Docker for me. I'm installing Docker here, and then I can create containers. Okay, and this containers could be that containers host the microservices. Okay, that's very important. So and let it install. Meanwhile, what I will do, I hope everyone understood about this. Is there anyone who doesn't understand this VM and the containers, that the VMs virtualizes the underlying hardware, but the containers virtualizes the host operating system? So that's very important definition here, and there are The containers characteristics are very important, very lightweight. They are very lightweight, boots up in seconds. It takes fractions of seconds to create. I'm going to create one web server. I'm going to show you that how it's easy to boot up any container, and it takes fractions of disk and memory. We'll also understand how about the footprint of the containers, and lot of advantages here. So whatever we have talked about the microservices, and Docker is the container engine, and we can also talk about the Kubernetes. That's the container orchestration engine to manage multiple containers. Okay, so this is the same diagram here. I'm going to install container engine, and then I'm going to create containers. To create containers, so these are the advantages of containers. So you will know about this. So container engines are Docker and Rocket. The most popular container engine is the Docker. We are installing Docker now. Not always cost released. We can install, we can deploy containers. We can have your application running in less resource using container engine. So then how come, if you have understood this question, then you would agree, Prasanna, that the VMs were used to utilize the resource better, right? We did the virtualization, and we created the VMs because we wanted to split the physical server into many VMs so that we can make use of the physical server better, right? And to create VMs, we can create multiple applications, right, in the same physical server box. Suppose I created 10 VMs, so I have an option to provision more than to deploy 2 to 3 applications. Even if one VM is taking only one server, I can do that. So same things for containers. So now I'm doing containerization. So in the same VM, I can create 3 containers, which we were using 3 VMs to create the application, but now I'm going to use only one VM to create 3 containers, and I can host my app server, web server, and database server on the same container, and I can have my application up and running. So in that way, it reduces the cost. Multiple app server in a container. What does it mean? Multiple app server. How many in a container? What do you have? You have microservices, and microservices is a subset of your application. So how can we have multiple app servers? What does it mean? Okay, so, okay, we are getting a lot of questions. So just hold on. Okay, hold on. I'm going to finish this session here. I'm going to talk about this very important. Hold on. We can take up your questions later. There are people who would be following the timeline, so I need to complete this. We'll take up the questions later. Yeah. So there are container engines here, Docker and Rocket. So there are the most popular container engine is Docker here, and there are other. So it's not like Docker is the only one container engine. There are other popular container engines as well, like Rocket. But we're going to talk about Docker mostly. And we have virtual VMs. I'm just trying to make you guys understand about the virtual VMs and the containers here. That the VMs, they virtualizes the physical server, and that is why they create the VMs, multiple VMs we can create. If we do not install this virtualization software, we cannot create the VM. And it's the same thing for containers. If we do not install a container engine, we cannot create multiple containers. So that is what we are doing right now. We are trying to install Docker. I hope Docker is installed now. I'm going to just check it. Docker version. Yes. So Docker is installed now. So this part is installed. See, I was using a physical server. This physical server is using how much CPU? This physical server is only one CPU. Okay, and how much RAM I'm using? I'm just using RAM of like 1 GB here. Okay, so 1 GB RAM, one CPU. It cannot be lesser than that. I have used T2.micro. Okay, the container type to just create this EC2 instance. If you look at, you see a lot of options here. Let me just let me select anything here, and I have used this T2.micro here, which is having one vCPU and 1 GB RAM. That's what I'm just showing you, that I'm having just one CPU and 1 GB of RAM. That's all this EC2 is, the hardware configuration is. And now I'm going to show you that I have installed Docker now, and I can create multiple containers. I can even have MySQL container running. So what is this container? How do we create containers? So there is an app, there is a website, okay? There is a website, we call it Docker Hub, okay? Hub.docker.com, you can just type this way. Let me just use this way, hub.docker.com, okay? So this is a very important website. So we create containers from images. So if you look at my next, I hope everyone understood this. I'm just going to same information. If you look at this container lifecycle, Docker container lifecycle, uh, see, uh, you have Docker engine installed now. Just now you can see that I have the Docker engine installed here. I have Docker engine has the client as well as the engine. So server, client as well as the server. I have installed both here, okay? And that's my Docker version. I'm gonna talk about, this is not the latest version that I can install Docker for, but there's a way that I can install a latest version. I'll talk about that later. Now, once we have the Docker engine, what we can do from Docker Hub, we can pull the image. So the containers, so microservices, basically the microservices are kept in a images, Docker images we call it, okay? Docker images or container images you can call it. Docker is the most popular container engine, and we have images out there, okay? Suppose what you can do, you have images, different app images. So you download the images from the Docker Hub, and once you run these images, this becomes container. You can stop the container, you can delete the containers as well. So what I'm going to show you that currently I do not have any images here. So to get the images, you have Docker images, you can just type, I do not have any images installed. So what I can do, there is this website called Docker Hub. You can basically find the images which is there in the Docker Hub. Let me find Fedora. Okay, Fedora is one of the image, you know, it's an operating system. So what you can do, you can download this image using Docker pull Fedora. You can do this. Okay, what if I'm going to just download this Docker pull Fedora? So Fedora is one of the image, and if you see, it will get downloaded from the Docker Hub, because I just installed Docker and it interacts with Docker Hub naturally. So if you look at the Docker images, you can just see that I have these images with me. If I run this image, it becomes a container. So currently no container is running. Docker ps is the command to see if there is any container running. There is no container running for me. So let me use the one web server. So if I talk about one of the web servers, HTTPD, Apache 2, you know, everyone. This is a web server, okay, HTTPD from Apache. It's a web server. It will host web pages. So if you want to run this, if you want to run this web server as a container, you need to first download this image. So I downloaded the image. Okay, this image has the microservice. This web server microservice, it is hosting, it is there in this image and all its dependencies. So currently I have this Ubuntu operating system as the base here. Okay, let me just go back to the diagram here. If you focus here on this diagram, so I have one infrastructure where I have only one CPU of one vCPU and 1 GB RAM. I have host operating system, which is hoping Ubuntu. I have used Ubuntu here, and I've installed Docker. And now I'm going to create a container web server, HTTPD, and it will have this container. What this image which I just downloaded? What does it have? it has the binaries and libraries required to run this web server, app A. So this image, what you see here, Docker images, what you see here, this image, 138 MB, has those binaries and libraries and the web server, uh, the microservices. So if I run this microservice, to run this microservice, what I need to use, I need to use some command here. I'm going to demonstrate that docker run. Docker run is the command I need to use to run, to create the container. Docker run -it, it is for the interactive mode, -p is for the port mapping. 83, I know that this 83 of the container, this is called port mapping. You have to do that. See, you have to run the web server on a port. Okay, if you, because it's a web server, I will show you that it will be accessible through the internet. Even you guys can access this. So I need to do a port mapping. It is for the interactive mode, and -p is for the port mapping. So 83 port of the container will map to 80 port of the host. Host is my what? This Ubuntu operating system. Okay, and then I have to type this image httpd. Okay, and then I have to type this here. Let's call this -d. We can call it -d. D is for the daemon mode, and then at last I have to type this httpd. That's the image name. So that's the format I need to run this container. Once I do this, I have just hit this enter. My web server is up and running. Trust me. If I do docker ps, this is the my container ID, and it is just, it got up just 8 seconds ago, and you can see this port mapping 83 and 80. And if I just want to check this, because I just deployed the web server, I can check this web page, the default web page which is there. For this web page, for this I need to have 83 port open for my in AWS. So what I need to do, I need to go to my AWS account. I need to open a port 80. Okay, because if I do not open the port 80, external users see that's my user, that's my application URL now. I'm going to show you that 80. This is my public IP. Okay, and that's my 83 port. Sorry, 83 port is where we have deployed the web server. If I hit this enter, I'm not getting the web page, because 83 port has to be enabled in my in the security group of my instance. There's something called security group. Okay, I need to come to the security here, and that's the security group. I have to open a port 83. If I do not open this port 83, I cannot access this, and I want uh, anywhere. So anywhere means this IP, and I'm just typing this. This is for web server access. As soon as I hit this, I configure this, I should be able to access that page. I've just added this guy. Can you see that this is a page, my dummy page. Even this is accessible for you guys also. Okay, I'm going to ping this in the chat window. You guys can access. You can see that this is accessible over the internet. I just deployed one web page. Okay, and I just opened this port 83 in my AWS console in the security group. I have to do that. If I do not open this 83 port, no one can access this. And this is called the source. This means all the IPs in the world can access this. Even I can restrict this as well. And if you look at the Docker PS now, you can see this is the container which is running. And suppose I have such containers, like earlier also I have downloaded one more image called Fedora. What I can do, I can run this container as well. I can start this container as well. So Docker run this is, I know this is a web, this is an operating system, so I do not need to do a port mapping here. Directly, I can just run this container, and I just run this container. So run -it -d. I did not do a port mapping. That's it. I use the same command. I did not do the port mapping here, and because not no point doing a port mapping. It's not any server and all. So if you do a Docker PS, you can see that both my containers are running up and running. So even what you can do, you can even go inside this container, Fedora. You can go inside this container. So to go inside the container, there is a command that you should be knowing about it, docker exec. This is the command we have to use, -it followed by the container ID name and then bash. So you have to use this bash. So now you can just see that I am inside, I was in the VM. Did someone notice that this got changed? I'm inside the container now, Fedora. I'm inside the container. So what you can do, you can update your packages, you can do whatever. So here, if you want to update the package, what you need to do, yum will work here. So apt will not work here because it's CentOS family. So yum will work here, right? So if I would have done apt update, this would not have worked. So I'm inside the Fedora container now. I can install whatever I need to install, all my software dependency, I can install Java, Jenkins, whatever I need to install. Then I can commit this image. I can save this image. I can customize this image, and I can reuse this image in later point of time. And once this is done, right? So this will take some time. Let me duplicate the session. I don't want to waste everyone's time here. So suppose you can see that currently two containers are running, right? Docker PS. The most important of all, if you want to understand the footprint of the containers, you have to use this command, docker stats. Docker stats would tell you that the footprint of the containers, how the footprint of the container is, how about the footprint of the container? So this container is using this much of no CPU, and because we are not doing any load test and all. If you stress this web server, if you stress this, if everyone clicks on this web server, we may get some hits and we may see some higher utilization of the web server and all. But we can just see the footprint using Docker stats. So that's all about it for today. Okay, that's about the session. Okay, so it's updated. Apt update is working. It will update all my packages, and I can commit, I can whatever so I can basically customize my container. Fedora, I'm just updating the packages here, and I can install whatever I need to install. Then I can save this image. I can customize this image. So this image will have the updated, since I'm updating all the packages. So if I commit this image, if I save this container, and so currently it's done, right? So what I can do, I can go to exit. I can come out of the container. I'm inside the container. You just look into this part. I'm inside the container. I'm going to exit this. So now I have come out of the container. I'm inside my VM now. Okay. And what I can do, I can just uh, I can commit this image. So whatever I wanted to install, I can customize this, and then I can use docker commit. Okay. And followed by the container ID. I can just take it from this. This is my container ID. Okay, and I have to use new image name. So this name is what, Fedora new. I can just type that way, updated, Fedora updated. I can use this as the image name. So my image is, so I'm just customizing, I'm just taking a snapshot of the image. So I just took the snapshot of the image. So if you look at my Docker images now, you will find there are three images. Docker images now, you will find there are three images now. There would be HTTPD, which we are running right now, and Fedora, and then we updated the Fedora, and you can just check the size of it. So all the softwares got updated, and there is a huge size difference between the Fedora, the one we downloaded, and with the updated packages. So you can also customize your image, and then you can run your image using Docker Run. And then that's how you create. So first of all, you need to know, you would get the image from your uh, DevOps team, and then you can run those image, and you can create containers, and you can deploy your application. Then you can make a use of Kubernetes if you have more containers. We'll talk about that, okay, some other time. But that's how it works. Container works. Okay, so that's all about it today. I wanted to cover, and we have reached the top of our time. I hope 10 minutes we have to extend. Okay, so a lot, we have covered a lot. Yeah, let me know your questions, please. Yeah. Pod means pod. Okay, pod. So we run containers. There is a pod. When we talk about Kubernetes, right? Thank you, Reti. So when you talk about Kubernetes, the pod comes. So basically, pods can have one or more containers. Okay. So pods, this word comes when we talk about Kubernetes only. Till now, all we are talking about all containers, but pods we talk when we talk about Kubernetes, and pods can have one or more containers. So just to answer your question, Prabhujot. Any other questions?
So I have one question.
Yeah, sure, Hari Krishna.
Performance perspective, so which one is a good? So do we have any disadvantages like performance test, etc.? Comparing with monolithic?
Could not understand your question.
No, performance-wise, so monolithic and in Kubernetes, this in microservices environment, which one is good? Like
Obviously, it's always microservices and Kubernetes architecture. See, Google, no one can handle load than Google does, right? How Google does, right?
yes,
Google spins up like 5 billion containers every week. And this Kubernetes is from the Google family. They have invented Kubernetes. So now you can understand that if you talk about performance, your half of the performance problem get resolved if you implement Kubernetes, because it does load balancing, it does auto scaling for you. You have to just make sure that the microservices are good. They are not consuming unnecessary memory or unnecessary footprint that they do not have. But if you talk about managing this load and auto scaling feature, load balancing and auto scaling are two important things that performance engineers need to worry. That when we are working in the cloud, we would like our servers to get auto provisioned, and load balancing should be done automatically. So if you use Kubernetes, those are the inbuilt features of Kubernetes. Those things get resolved, are taken care, load balancing and auto scaling group. What we need to worry as a performance engineer is that the microservices, the the containers should not take unnecessary resource. So you have to test your containers basically. Then you can have multiple containers to accommodate more load.
okay. And what monitoring tools which we use here? So same like Dynatrace AppDynamics, or we have here any?
You can use, but currently what they do, they mostly we work using any cloud provider. Either you go with AWS or Azure or Google Cloud or Oracle Cloud. What they have some inbuilt tool. They do not like people, their customers, to use any third-party tool like Dynatrace or AppDynamics. You can use them. Dynatrace and AppDynamics do support containers monitoring. But if you're talking about AWS, what beautiful thing they have? They have CloudWatch Container Insights. Okay, they have CloudWatch Container Insights. This is the tool they use to monitor the containers. If you look at the container insights, so this is dedicated for the containers, and it gives you all the footprint of the container.
Okay.
So, like Krishna, I have one question. So when you say like in a microservice-based architecture, microservices are like loosely coupled. So how do we integrate them? So like I see there like a Kafka is there and other.
Service interact with each other through REST API.
Okay,
So
so apart from if we use any like messaging services like Kafka is there or ActiveMQ is there. So if we talk about in terms of performance wise, which which messaging like we should use, which is the best gives the in terms of performance?
see, again, it depends on your architecture. See, first of all, you need to understand what architecture you are working on. And then we can talk about either you're using Kafka or normal REST API implementation and all those stuff. It all depends on the architecture and depends on your microservices and containers. What type of microservices, what types of messaging service. So it's all about a thing to explore on based on your application and the microservices you're running.
Okay, thank you.
I'm mostly focused on the AWS here, Prabhujot. So you can ask about AWS mostly here. Azure, I need to open Azure and show you. Yeah. For this session, we talk about AWS. Okay, I think we are all good. If you have any questions, we have one WhatsApp group. Feel free to ask your questions. I'm there in the group. I'll try my best to answer the rest of the questions. Thank you everyone for joining. You can attend the demo session, which is there on 9th. You will be notified in the same WhatsApp group. Thank you everyone for joining. I'm going to stop the recording.
Yeah,
And
thanks, Roshan.
recording will be there. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.